Before you can write a single word of a play, you need an idea. Easy, right? Except I had a whole stack of them. Witches on trial, haunted lochs, bloody dinners in castles. Only one survived the cut, and today I'm going to tell you how I chose it. Hello and welcome. So this is episode 1 of my new series where I'm going to take you behind the scenes as I write a play completely from scratch. We'll go from the messy scribbles and the wild research right through to a finished script, and maybe even a staged performance right here on YouTube. But first things first, how do you choose the story to write your play about? So grab a cup of tea, and I'm going to show you how I wrestled with finding the idea for my first play. So let's start with the graveyard of ideas, the plays I nearly wrote. The drowned voice of Carlinwalk. So Castle Douglas has Carlinwalk Loch, and once upon a time people lived on little islands dotted around it. They're all underwater now, they were drowned. So I imagined a play where those drowned voices rose up, telling stories of the lives they lost, the loves they left, the history that was swallowed by the loch. It would have been eerie, poetic, atmospheric, almost like a Scottish owl town. And although it's beautiful in my head, it ended up in the graveyard of rejected ideas because it's probably too lyrical for a first play. I need something with meat and drive, not just a mood. So the next idea that ended up in the graveyard of rejected plays is The Last Stand at Freve. So picture Freve Castle, 1455. The Black Douglases under siege by the king's forces. You've got cannons, thundering, betrayal in the night, epic stuff. I pictured it as sort of like a Scottish Les Mis. Revolution, loyalty, family lines breaking, it's got it all. So it's an incredible history, but it ended up in the graveyard because it's just too big. Castles, sieges, armies, you'd need a West End budget to stage it. And I'm really hoping for the top of my budget is going to be a village hall. So as nice as it would be, and as epic as it would be, it's just not feasible. So it ended up in the graveyard. My next big idea was a play called The Patient's Voices. So we have the Crichton Asylum in Victorian Dumfries, and it was considered ahead of its time. It was very progressive in its approach to treating mental health. And I thought, what if the patients told their stories directly? So it would be using monologues about why they were there. So you've got heartbreak, misunderstanding, trauma. You'd see humanity in these patients, whereas society sees only madness. And it ended up in the graveyard because it is a powerful idea, but it's a bit too experimental. It's more an Edinburgh Fringe piece than a first community play. So sadly, as great as that play could be, I've kind of rejected it and put it into the graveyard. It may come out of the graveyard one day, but for now, it's not the one that's going to be written in this series. Another play idea that I ultimately put into the graveyard was a play called Inside. And this was a two-hander set in the mid-20th century. You have one patient and one doctor, and we just see their therapy sessions again and again and again. It's almost like a game of psychological chess. It would have been intimate, tense, possibly a little bit claustrophobic, but I ultimately passed on this idea because it was just a bit too risky. With just two characters, it's either going to soar and be really powerful, or it's going to fall flat on its face and just be a total flop. And for a debut play, I wanted a bigger canvas, not quite as big Siege in a castle, but bigger. So ultimately this one has gone into the graveyard. Much like Patient Voices, it may be resurrected one day, but for now, it's in the graveyard. Now, this idea that I ultimately rejected may sound familiar. It's called The Black Dinner, and it's centered around the 6th Earl of Douglas and his brother, who were both quite young at the time, were invited to Edinburgh Castle to be wined and dined by King James II, who was 10 years old at the time. And then, right after they had had their pudding, dinner was all done, a black bull's head was brought out and slammed down on the table. And the 6th Earl of Douglas and his brother were executed. So it might sound familiar because George R.R. Martin borrowed it for the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones. And although it is a brilliant story, it's got your drama, it's got all those elements, it was ultimately rejected because it would always be compared to Game of Thrones. And I don't fancy writing a knockoff Red Wedding. So into the graveyard it went. I was quite excited about this idea until I thought about it a bit more and it ended up in the graveyard. And it was called The Last Night at Dundrennan, which would tell the story of Mary Queen of Scots and her final night at Dundrennan Abbey before fleeing to England. I could picture the candlelight, the whispers, the fear of exile that Mary would have. A queen on the run. It's tragic and human all at once. But I ultimately passed on it. So even though it would make a great play, the competition when it comes to Mary Queen of Scots is quite fierce. Her story has been told thousands of times, so it would be hard to make it feel like a fresh idea. So ultimately, it's gone into the graveyard of rejected ideas. Well, I'll give you three guesses why this idea ended up in the graveyard. The Kukubri witch trials. You've got accusations, you've got torture, you've got women being dragged through courts and branded as witches. It would have been raw, brutal, full of injustice, and Scotland's answer to the Crucible. And that's why I passed on it. And it ended up in the graveyard. It's too close to the Crucible. It would have been stuck in its shadow. So those were the contenders. Strong ideas, all of them, but none quite fit what I needed for a first play. But one idea refused to leave me alone. Every time I set it aside, it crept back in, like a whisper from the shore. Set in the 18th century, in a small Stuartry fishing village, it follows the lives of villagers who risk everything to bring contraband from France, so brandy, tobacco, salt, and they hide it under the noses of the excisemen. It's a world of candlelit cottages, secret caves, whispers in the night, families torn between hunger and honesty. Fathers dragged into danger to feed their children, sons tempted by easy coin, wives praying that their husbands make it home alive, and looming over it all, the threat of betrayal. One wrong word to the wrong person and the whole village could burn. And for me, it's personal. I worked at the Smugglers Inn pub in Auchencairn when I was a student. When I would come home for Christmas and the summer, I would be in those bars and see those posters and the old stories on the walls about the smugglers in the area. So there were histories of the history of all these things that used to happen in this village. And it stuck with me. And I've always thought, there's got to be a story in here somewhere. And I thought it could be a play. So it was one of the ideas that it just kept coming and coming. So smuggling isn't just about crime. It's about community, neighbours protecting each other's, shared secrets over ale in the pub. And the line between survival and betrayal, that's drama. That's theatre. So why this idea, above all of the others, which are all good ideas? Well, it's because this one's local. It's in my blood, it's my hometown, and it's in the pub where I pulled the pints. So it's a part of me. It's dramatic. You've got danger, you've got secrecy, you've got family bonds being tested to breaking point. It's got the drama. It's flexible. I can mix monologues with big group scenes. I can do the action and put in the emotions. And most importantly, it feels alive. I can see these characters. I can hear their voices, and I can smell the salt on their coats. So the smugglers stole my heart, and honestly, that feels right. So there we have it. The Smugglers of Auchencairn is the play I am going to write. In the next episode, we're going to dive into the history. We'll see if we can find the real smuggling routes that the smugglers used to get the contraband in. We're going to see if we can find out exactly what the contraband was that they would smuggle into Auchencairn. And we're going to try and look up the history of the villages of Auchencairn. And we're going to take these dusty facts and then we're going to turn it into a drama that's living and breathing and feels real. If you were going to write a play, what story would you choose? Drop it in the comments down below because I'd love to see what ideas you can come up with. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe this video so you don't miss episode 2. This is just the beginning. So until next time, see you later. Bye.